Good morning. I will call the meeting of the January 31st Electoral Area Services Committee. I'd like to acknowledge we are meeting on the unceded and traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, on whose land we all benefit from the wonderful resources and beauty, and commit to working with the Comox First Nation on a government-to-government basis. We have a motion to move in camera under 91F of the Community Charter. Could I have a motion?
Move it.
Moved and seconded. Director Arbor, anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. First item up is the management report for receipt. I need a motion. Moved
Yes.
and seconded. And are there any comments, or does staff have any comments on the report? Director Arbor.
Thanks. I'm just wondering, I was reminded of the gas station work and our bylaw update. So are we still planning that, or are we deferring to later summer? How are we doing with Omicron and the rest of it?
Thank you very much, Chair. And the question is about a proposal to consider changes to the zoning bylaw around service stations in the rural area. And Ton True is coming to the mic to provide an answer as to when that may be expected.
Welcome, Ton.
Good morning through the CEO to the chair and directors. This is one of our 2022 work plan priorities. We have initiated the review of that definition, and the plan is to bring something forward to you in early 2022.
Thank you. Any other questions on the management report? Hearing and seeing none, is anyone opposed? And that's carried. Item E, public input of the 2022-2026 financial plan for receipt. Moved, and I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. At today's meeting, we are commencing many of the reports with respect to the financial plan of the services of the electoral areas. At the start of each one of these meetings where the financial plan is considered, we will provide for you any summary or update in terms of public input. As this is the first meeting, we've received none at this time. But again, if the public is interested in the process, these meetings will review all of our services that are provided to the rural areas. Our website provides updates, including access to those financial plans. And as well, there's the opportunity to provide us with feedback and input, which will be shared with our area directors. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the directors? Hearing and seeing none, is anyone opposed to receipt? And that's carried. Next item up is the Advisory Planning Commission minutes.
Move it.
Moved. Or would you like to move each individually? Both? Is that all right? Any comments or questions on the minutes for both Area A and Area C, APC? Hearing and seeing none, anyone opposed? And that's carried. Item number 2, Deep Water Recovery, 5084 Island Highway, land use contrary to zoning for receipt. Moved by Director Arbor, seconded Director Grieve, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Amanda Yasinski, Manager of Bylaw Compliance, is here to present this report and outline to you the recommendations and answer any of your questions.
Thanks, Amanda. Over to you.
Amanda, if you would prefer to sit, then the camera will be on, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I can't hear.
Amanda's
Yeah,
just
sorry, we're just she's going to sit at a place where the camera will be on her. Just one moment, please. Thanks.
Good morning through the CAO to the chair. This report provides an update on the bylaw enforcement file and advises of potential next steps in enforcement to halt any non-compliant land use activities related to shipbreaking on the subject property at 5084 Island Highway. This report also addresses trespass and land alterations into Glover Community Park, a Comox Valley Regional District Park, by the operators of the subject property. In September 2021, land alterations took place in Glover Community Nature Park, which affected the southernmost portion of Glover Park. Staff has followed up in writing to Deepwater Recovery and advised that an aquatic and riparian habitat development permit is required for those land alterations that occurred within 30 meters of the watercourse, and that an application to the province for works in and about a stream may be required if the watercourse itself had been altered. Any remediation work required to the affected areas in Glover Park are to be done through the assistance of a registered professional biologist at Deepwater Recovery's expense. To date, there has not been a development permit applied for to retroactively address the land alterations in Glover Park. Specifically on this report regarding the shipbreaking file, this is an updated enforcement file to date, an overview of the applicable zoning and principal uses of the subject property, and recommended next steps. Should the committee and then the CVRD board determine that shipbreaking use is not a permitted use in the industrial marine zone. The initial bylaw complaints regarding 5084 Island Highway and a change in use to shipbreaking and associated activities were first received in March of 2020. CVRD staff have reviewed all available information related to the use on the subject property and have determined, in their opinion, that the activities involved in the process of shipbreaking are not an allowable use in the industrial marine zone. Through the CVRD zoning bylaw, for shipbreaking to be permitted on the subject property, the use must fall within a permitted principal or accessory use. It is staff's opinion that shipbreaking does not qualify as either within an industrial marine zone. Additionally, section 102.1 of the CVRD zoning bylaw provides that no land, surface of water, building, or structure in any zone shall be used for any purpose other than those specified for the zone in which it is located. Uses not expressly listed as a principal or accessory use within a zone are prohibited. As well, section 302.1 of the zoning bylaw provides that any use not expressly permitted in this bylaw is prohibited in every zone. To allow shipbreaking on the subject property and in an industrial marine zone, an application for either a temporary use permit or a zoning bylaw amendment would be required. There was a deadline of January 17th, 2022 for the operators and owners of the subject property to respond and confirm with the CVRD the owner's intent in complying with CVRD bylaws by either stopping the shipbreaking use or applying for a land use application. Although CVRD staff have received correspondence from lawyers working with Deepwater Recovery, no official statement on their position or application has been received to date. Staff propose that the board put its mind to whether the use is permitted or not as such. If the board agrees that the shipbreaking use is not permitted, then start the following motions that staff has prepared through this report. In conclusions, the options that staff are recommending on this report today are specifically that the board consideration is requested, respecting the shipbreaking use in the industrial marine zone in the rural Comox Valley zoning bylaw, and whether it is deemed permitted or not permitted. Depending on the board's determination of the above question, the following options are available. Direct legal action and enforcement to halt contravention of the zoning bylaw and the OCP. This would include legal proceedings in the Supreme Court to obtain a mandatory and permanent injunction against the property owner. It would also include addressing unlawful land clearing that took place in Glover Park without the required development permits. Direct staff to not pursue legal action and enforcement to halt contravention of the zoning bylaw and the OCP. 3, direct enforcement on only one of the above contraventions. This report supports option 1, should the board affirm that shipbreaking is not a permitted use. And I can answer any questions on this report.
Thank you, Amanda. Do the directors have any questions? Oh, it sounds like the directors were fairly clear, and thank you for the report. On receipt then, is anyone opposed? And that is carried. And would someone like to make a recommendation?
I will move the recommendation 1.
And do we have to declare permitted or not permitted? Yes. So Director Grieve, if you could qualify, is your recommendation to permit or not permit shipbuilding as a use?
My recommendation is not permit is clearly in contravention to the zoning, needs to change.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Second by Director Arbor. And any comments or questions on that recommendation? And just a question to staff, with that recommendation then also allow for the 3 items that are on the screen, or do we need to pass those individually?
Madam Chair, those 3 are provided as separate resolutions to flow from this,
Okay.
should you determine it's not permitted.
All right, thank you. So we can just vote on that first, the definition. So the recommendation is that shipbreaking is not a permitted use in the industrial marine zone in the rural Comox Valley zoning bylaw number 520 dated 2019. Is anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. All right, we have some further recommendations. I'll read out number 1 and then I'll ask for a motion. That the Comox Valley Regional District Board approve legal action and enforcement to halt contravention of the zoning bylaw on the property legally described as PCLA DD 27784N of Lot 11, Nelson District, except parts outlined in red on plans 397RW and 1414R, and accept those parts in plans 7190, 8906, 21511, 22414, 28338, 29341, and 29342, PID 004-758-901. Could I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Director Grieve, and then Director Arbor has seconded. And any comments on that motion? Hearing and seeing none, is anyone opposed? And that is carried. Number 2, we have a recommendation that the Comox Valley Regional District Board approve legal action and enforcement to halt contravention of the aquatic and riparian habitat development section of bylaw number 337, being the Rural Comox Valley Official Community Plan bylaw number 337 dated 2014 on the property legally described as Lot 9, District Lot 11, Nelson District, Plan 8906, Glover Community Nature Park, PID 005-481-252. And could I get a motion?
I'll move to.
Moved by Director Grieve, seconded by Director Arbor. Comments, questions? Hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. And lastly, number 3, the recommendation is that the Comox Valley Regional District Board authorize its solicitors to provide an undertaking as to damages in support of an application for an interim injunction to enforce the bylaws of the Comox Valley Regional District.
I'll move 3 as well.
Moved by Director Grieve, seconded by Director Arbor. Comments? Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. Thank you, directors.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Directors. And just to confirm that those recommendations are recommendations of the committee that will go to the board on February the 15th for consideration by the board at that time.
Thank you. Moving on, item number 3. Is your question regarding
The
the
last
next item or the last?
The CEO's comments.
Sorry, to your just previous comment, Director Arbor.
So just to confirm, will the entire board be voting on these recommendations or just the areas?
When it goes to the board, it is the electoral areas that would vote on a matter like of this nature.
Thank you. Item number 3, the 2022-2026 proposed financial plan budget presentations for receipt. Moved by Director Arbor,
Second.
second Director Grieve, and I will pass it to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Kevin DeVell, Manager of Financial Planning, is here to introduce the budget process. He will provide a brief overview, and then the committee will be presented with various budgets that apply to the electoral areas. So first off is Kevin DeVell.
Thanks.
Thank you
Kevin.
Thank you very much, Russell, through the chair to the directors. Good morning. So yes, as Russell indicated, I'm going to provide a very brief presentation just with respect to an overview of the upcoming financial planning process. And then we'll be turning it over to each individual budget manager to begin reviewing their service budgets with the directors. So bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to share my screen. Right, and hopefully everybody can see the first slide. So as this suggests, we did present this similar presentation earlier at the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee. So Director Grieve will have certainly seen this before, but just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of kind of the overview and of the process and what to expect over the next several weeks. So as was presented to the board last Tuesday at the regular board meeting, the theme of our financial planning process this year is celebrating accomplishments while continuing to plan for long-term sustainability in uncertain times. And certainly that's in recognition of the fact that the directors are entering into their final year of their terms. And we certainly wanted to take the opportunity to certainly look at what has been accomplished over those terms. But at the same time, ensuring that we're continuing to look forward and ensuring that we can continue to deliver sustainable, appropriate service levels in the number of services that we do provide throughout the Comox Valley, particularly in the uncertain times we continue to find ourselves in. So just briefly on the process itself. So we are at that proposed budget stage of our financial planning process, and that proposed financial plan in full is now posted online for not only the directors, but certainly the public to certainly take a look at and digest. It is at the link that's provided at the below of the slide here at www.comoxvalleyrd.ca/current-budget. So I certainly encourage everyone to go there and take a look and certainly look at those budgets related to the various services that your household may very well participate in. The process involves rolling out each of these various service budgets to their respective committees, boards, commissions, etc. And staff then takes all of the feedback and all of the direction received from directors over the next up to 7 weeks, and then we will consolidate that. We will then kind of couple that with a review of all of our 2021 carry forwards with respect to items such as work plan items, surplus figures, etc. And of course, those are all determined as we're also navigating through our year-end financial audit process. We will also then take a look at any updated grant information that might become available over that time. So, if there are grants kind of in various stages of approval process, did we receive word of an approval or any kind of such status as that? And that may then get reflected in the future iteration of the financial plan as well. Of course, we take all of this information as we move into that kind of mid-March timeframe, roll that up into what then becomes the recommended financial plan. And it is that recommended financial plan that gets rolled up into our annual budget bylaw, which will then go in front of the full board for its ultimate approval at the end of March. Because of course, by legislation, we do have to have a 5-year financial plan adopted and in place by no later than March 31st. Lastly, just wanted to note with the directors that you may notice that some of the budget staff reports will look slightly different this year. Staff undertook where appropriate and where we felt it was prudent to do so, that we've tried to present things in a bit more of a concise and consolidated manner. So certainly any related services or services that are very similar, we've tried to kind of bundle those together, given we know there's a lot of information that is thrown the director's way at this time of year. And so we really just wanted to make sure we were providing that information in as efficient a manner as possible, while still making sure that you are getting all of that key information or key messaging in hand to make appropriate decisions on supporting budgets as they come forward. And then, of course, lastly, we are going to be again presenting our budget dashboard, and I'll kind of put that up on the screen momentarily. But in essence, we kind of track through that dashboard as we have in past years. Anything that's identified with a yellow dot will be something that we are kind of bringing forward on today's agendas. Red dots are those things that would then be showing up on subsequent meeting agendas, and then, of course, green dots are anything that's been approved by a committee, commission, etc. Has already been dealt with at a previous meeting. So in addition to today's meeting with the Electoral Area Services Committee, we do have a subsequent meeting to review budgets on February 7th, and then once again on February 14th. And then there is a last opportunity kind of early on or mid-March as well, if it's required. So I will not stop sharing this, and then I will quickly throw up the dashboard. So bear with me one moment. And hopefully everyone can see that. And I do apologize for the small print, but I think in essence, this gives everyone a full breadth of the number of services that as a regional district we are managing on behalf of ratepayers and residents within the community. So currently for 2022, we are once again over that 100 service threshold. We're actually sitting at 101. So what you'll see here today is there's a number of budgets located here that we'll be going through shortly with respect to mostly fire budgets and some planning budgets and the like. And then, of course, we do have 3 subsequent electoral area meetings where we'll be presenting, a plethora of other budgets as well. So I'll leave it there, and I'll certainly turn it back to the chair and the CEO so that we can begin with the individual service budget presentations.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Did any of the directors have any questions on that presentation? Hearing and seeing none, is there anyone opposed to receipt? And that's carried. All right, so we can start to dig in. The first item in the budget is the Rural Cumberland and Bates Hugh Band Fire Protection Services functions 210 and 228 for receipt. Moved, and I can second. Oh, thank you. Over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And I'm going to refer this to James Bass now, and he will lead you through the presentations to be made on items 4, 5, and 6, which are all fire related.
Thanks you. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Through the CAO to the chair and to the committee members, we'll be going through the fire service proposed budgets today, and we've grouped them in respect of your valuable time. So the first one is the financial plan as proposed for the Rural Cumberland Fire Protection and the Bates Hugh Band Fire Protection Service. Next slide.
I think we're just pulling it on. Always technical stuff, but
yeah.
Director Grief, can you see that slide on your screen?
Go. Perfect. Next slide.
Great, go ahead, thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. So in our grouping, both of these services are actually provided by way of service agreement with the actual operational delivery provided by a municipality. And so we've grouped these together. The financial plans for both of these are essentially based on the budget submission by the individual municipalities, and that includes any of the capital that those services would be needing. You'll see that we have modest increases in requisition as we transfers from reserves actually mitigate any of the increases. Another key piece to this is the shared allocation of costs for a planned fire services review in 2022. The vision being that it's been some 10 years or more since the last strategic planning at a high level for all regional district services. So we'll be doing that if possible in 2022. Next slide, Lisa. So the first one is the rural Cumberland fire protection. With this particular one, you'll see that the tax rate is 58 cents per thousand of assessed value. That's actually down from 79 cents last year, which is probably more a function of increased assessment values. The residential value of 600,000 for a home, they're estimated to pay about $350 for the service. Requisition is 210,000. That's an increase of 10,000 from last year. Personnel costs is a modest increase as well. Operational expenses is an increase of $8,000 or so. These are largely service agreement cost increases and would be as we continue to pay our portion of the capital expenditure for the new fire hall. Contributions to reserve are not actually required at this time for this particular service. Next slide. Bates Huban. This is the residential tax rate for this service is sitting at 32 cents per thousand, which is a decrease from 44 cents last year. For that $600,000 home, the estimated tax would be $189. The requisition, full requisition for this is $47,500. The personnel costs, modest increase as well, with $594 increase from last year. Operational expenses, these are increased, and these are increased specifically for service agreement costs. The town of Comox will be purchasing a new apparatus, and our portion of that will be covered over the next 2 years. Contributions to reserves, as the other one, are not required at this time for this particular service. Next slide. And these are the two fire departments that are providing the fire protection for us in these two areas, Cumberland Fire Rescue and Comox Fire Rescue. And we're available for any questions that the directors may have.
Thanks, James. I don't see any question from Director Grieve. I have one myself. James, I recall the, some of the, I wasn't sure if it was Comox or Courtney. I think it was a joint application going forward to UBCM regarding the fire reduction, like the chipping program. Did that ever go through?
Yes, if I may, through the CAO.
James, we will respond to the directors individually because I think decisions on those matters are confidential at this time.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Just, I didn't see it in budget, so I wasn't sure if that was being worked on.
We'll get back to you.
Okay, you'll get back to me. Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing and seeing none. On receipt, is anyone opposed? And that's carried. And we have recommendation number 1.
I'll move one.
Moved and seconded that the financial plan for the Rural Cumberland Fire Protection Service Function 2210 be approved. Anyone opposed? And that's a vote of A and C. And that is carried. And recommendation number 2, that the proposed 2022-2026 financial plan for the Bates Huban Fire Protection Service Function 228 be approved. Moved by Director Arbor,
I'll second it.
second by Director Grieve. Comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. All right. Moving on to the next item. I believe it is sorry, my screen's. The financial plan for fire protection functions 215, 220, 225, and 226 for receipt. Move Director Arbor, and I can second, and back to staff.
Yeah, thank you. There we go. Yes, so through the CAO to the chair and directors, this financial plan grouping is fire services that are managed directly by the regional district, specifically for Denman Island, Hornby Island, Fannie Bay, and Union Bay. Next slide, please. Perfect. Now, these services are provided directly by way of CBRD fire chiefs and volunteers. We also have, in some cases, working relationships with associations for the provision of the financial aspects, financial monitoring and bookkeeping. The financial plans for these fire departments are based on the budget submission provided by the fire chiefs and the CBRD costs as they unfold. Grouping, we have mostly modest increases in requisition, all required to maintain the current service level that is being delivered. Contributions to reserves are always in preparation for planned capital purchases. And again, we have a shared allocation of costs for the planned fire service review in 2022. Next slide. Next slide, Lisa. Perfect, thank you. So we'll group with Denman Island Fire Protection. This one, we have a residential tax rate of about 55 cents per thousand of assessed value. That's a reduction from 76 cents. We have a grouping here of a residential value of $600,000 for a home. The annual tax for this is estimated at $333. The tax requisition for Denman Island is $400,000, and that is an increase, but as we are building towards capital expenditures, planned capital expenditures. Personnel costs of about $98,000, full operational costs of $223, which is an increase of about $10,500. Contributions to reserves for Denman is $123,000 and change as we build towards planned capital purchases. We have also within the immediate year a planned capital purchase for a replacement fire engine at an estimated cost of $550,000. Next slide. For Hornby, we have a residential tax rate of approximately 58 cents, which as before is actually a reduction from 2021. For that residential residence of a value of 600,000, the estimated tax would be $347 for that value of home. The requisition is $560,000, which is an increase of $10,000. Personnel costs of $145,000. Operational expenses for a total of $321,000, which is an increase of 14. Contributions to reserve, again towards capital purchases, is $66,000, and planned capital expenditures in 2022 is $56,000 total. Next slide, please. Fannie Bay. The residential tax rate for Fannie Bay is sitting at 61 per thousand of assessed value, and that's a reduction from 77 cents last year. For that $600,000 home, the estimated tax would be $365. The tax requisition for this service is $185,000, which is an increase of $5,000. Personnel costs of $77,000. Full operational expenses of $108,000, almost $109,000, and no contributions to reserves are planned in 2022. But again, we will start putting funds away in capital reserve beginning in 2023. No capital expenditures are actually planned for 2022. Next slide. Union Bay. Union Bay, this is the inaugural budget for this service. So a lot of the information that we have is comparative to previous budgets and budget formats. So the residential tax rate for this service is sitting at 66 cents per thousand of assessed value. For that, again, average $600,000 home, the tax is estimated at $397. The tax requisition for this service is $480,000. Personnel costs are actually $128,000, which is a decrease, and that's a result of a restructuring of the relationship with the fire department members and staff. Operational expenses is $348. Again, that is an increase, but compared to a different mechanism in the improvement district. So the GLs were somewhat different. Contributions to reserves, we're planning on 5,380, which would be a decrease from previous years. And we have a capital expenditure of estimated $60,000 in 2022. Next slide, please. Right on. And there we've got our cruise. We've got the Denman Island on the top left. Top right is Fannie Bay. Hornby Island on the bottom left. And the new to the regional district, Union Bay on the bottom right. And we're available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. If there's no questions, Director Arbor, did you have one? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James. I guess the format has changed a little bit from last year's, and these presentations is very it's very high level. I actually liked it when we had the different fire chiefs present a little more detail around both their budgets and their activities. So that's my feedback. And the reason why I find it high level, and I'm referencing back to the staff report. Can you go back to slide 4, the Denman, I think. Overall, I won't show concern because I have to recognize that fiscally, all these services are very well managed, and there's either small increases or in some cases decreases. So that's all appreciated and good news. But one more slide for the Denman one. So yeah, I'm trying to square, the table seems incomplete because I'm just trying to square. We have an increase in the tax requisition of 40,000. But then if you look at personal operational expenses and contribution to reserves, that doesn't square to the 40,000, right? Because we have a decrease of 3,000, a decrease of 23,000. So that's 26,000 down. And then go back up 10,000. So that's 16,000 down, but our requisition goes up 40,000. So it's just that the slide I don't know, maybe there's not sufficient financial information for me for the slide to square it up. So I'm trying to refer back to the staff report. I think usually we delve just that one layer deeper. I don't know if staff has comments.
I see a hand up from Kevin.
Thank you very much to the chair of directors. Perhaps I can assist in providing some additional context to Director Arbor. So with respect to Denman Island Fire, you're correct that we are indicating that there is a proposed increase of $40,000 to that requisition. That is partly because we are anticipating less surplus carry forward than in the past year. That is down about $28,000. That may not be reflected on this particular slide, but it's certainly indicated in the table in the staff report. And then, of course, yes, I mean, we as James alluded to, there are some slight increases to things like operational expenses.
Sorry, Kevin, you just cut out right when you were explaining that. So you mentioned right when you were explaining that. So you mentioned the decrease, and that if you wouldn't mind just repeating.
Absolutely, sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on with my audio here, but yeah. So as I indicated, although we are proposing an increase of $40,000 on the requisition, that is largely attributable to the fact that we are showing or projecting less surplus carry forward than over past years. So whereas in 2021 we had a surplus carry forward of about 67,000, we're only anticipating bringing over about 38 this year. So that does contribute to some of that. And then, of course, as James has showed in this slide here, we are showing some slight increases in some general items, but certainly some decreases in other. That's all works together to result in us requiring that additional 40,000. And that's also being led by, we tried to keep the reserve contribution fairly high within the service, given some of the capital outlays that are anticipated in future years, not so much with the fire engine specifically, because we are looking at likely some short-term debt for that, but certainly working towards the eventual replacement of the fire hall located over on Denman.
Thank you. So I guess what's missing from the slides is that surplus variation. And I do realize, I think why it matters is I do want to get a little more color in the case of Denman anyways. We are looking at the potential for around 2025 for a new fire hall, which obviously would require, I imagine, electoral assent, unless we are building sufficient reserves to pay cash, which I imagine we are not. So my question is, how are we currently thinking about that balance between how much are we anticipating and attributing to that project in reserve versus what we will actually finance by 2025?
So through the chair to Director Arbor. So currently within the 5-year financial plan, you'll notice in 2024, we've indicated a potential $3 million expenditure for capital projects, i.e. a fire hall. Right now we have projected that the lion's share, if not the majority of that, would be long-term debt. But certainly as we move into our 2023 and ultimately 2024 financial planning, we will undoubtedly be taking a look at our reserve balances, looking at debt, looking at the what other opportunities there are to support these types of works. As the directors are aware, things like community works funds have now been made available to fire facilities and fire apparatus. So that could be something we may bring forward in a future year, or we would certainly be looking at other potentials for grant funding and those kinds of things. So it's still early days as far as the planning for that, but we will certainly be coming back to the directors with more as we get closer to having to make those decisions.
Yeah, thanks. And again, I think last year I had asked for ahead of budgets for a community works funds update, because I think you're right, that can influence the thinking, not on specific service level, but as we look at the range of services and options to attribute. So I think, again, we will have to wait for the next, I can refer back to the September report, but you're correct that would influence. The reason why that matters, it's a 12% increase in this particular service. And I just want to understand whether, when we go to explain it to residents, whether that's that makes a significant contribution towards reducing the financing of the fire law hall later. It doesn't sound like it is. So, yeah, I guess that's fine. But it's a big jump. And as we saw from BC assessment, Denman Island is getting hit pretty hard this year, I think, in terms of tax increases. So this one jumped out with the 12% increase in the fire protection service. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if the director doesn't mind me saying, whenever I hear assessment increases resulting in tax, I just provide a little correction in that increased assessment does not necessarily mean increased taxes. For the individual, it will depend on their increases relative to the others that participate in the service.
As we discussed at the board meeting, the problem with Denman is that it's fine for the services on Denman, but their share of the regional pie will go up because their assessments went up by 53% as a community compared to 34% in the rest of the valley. That's a 20% difference. So it is anticipated that there'll be a major jump. And there's only one taxpayer. So there's two optics on this. One is to look at individual services. The other is to try to manage what is likely to be a jump for sure in the hundreds of dollars because of that contribution to regional services. That's why I raise it. I realize we need to keep those two optics a little bit differently at the decision-making level, but with such a big capital project coming in 3 years from now, I think it's important to start to get that story right for the residents of Denman Island to understand how we are balancing that and what we can anticipate. It's early days, but the other three services in my area were all pretty stable, and this one has a jump. So that's all I'm noticing today. That's feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Arbor. Director Grieve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We kind of had a discussion similar to this at the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee. And although it's laudable to try to keep the requisition low, I would think that we're living very uncertain times, and I certainly don't envy our financial team not having a crystal ball to be able to balance the interest rates against the inflationary trends we're seeing. It's financing versus reserves. I mean, you see reserves actually decreasing in value, or at least not keeping up with inflation. So I would suggest that the residents would probably see more of a jump from their assessments on their insurance premiums as opposed to this. And thank God for the fire halls we do have, because they act as kind of a stop against what we see in the unprotected areas where there is no fire protection, and they have really no recourse. So it's a difficult one, but I think that through a combination of contributing to reserves and going out for financing, we know that there's probably going to be an increase in rates there too. So there's really no easy answers, but I do feel for the residents, because they are feeling some anxiety around the increasement in their assessments. But like this CAO reiterated here, it doesn't necessarily translate into an increase in taxation per se, except for the fact that in the end of the day, we all have to pay something. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. I see staff. Doug DeMarzo has your hand up.
Thank you. Just quickly through the chair to directors, that also just a quick point on the tax and insurance conversation. I'd just like to add that Denman did recently get a superior shuttle service, and we're hoping that that'll bring down as well the insurance costs for some of the residents on Denman. So there's a number of factors the fire hall considers, obviously some potentially large capital, but they also work hard to recognize savings on the insurance side, and those often can outweigh those extra costs of operating the department. So just a reminder that that's also part of the conversation.
Thanks for that, Doug. And Director Arbor, did you have a?
So that's now we're getting into it, right? So that's the kind of presentation that I prefer, where we get a more wholesome understanding of the different contexts and threads in the financial. So I realize we tried to streamline our budget processes. But for me, my initial feedback as we start this budget season is that might be streamlined a little too much, because I think that just like the point that Doug just made, that can be an important element of the story to tell to Denman Island residents as well around that shuttle, which is spread, but budget time is really a good time to give that comprehensive picture. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Arbour. James, I had just one question, because as a non-Denman Hornby Union Bay resident, I look at the requisition and the cost to taxpayers of the different services, and I'm noting like quite a much higher cost to those residents versus Bates Huban. And am I to I'm guessing this is because of the fact that we contract out those services to Comox Fire Hall versus owning our own trucks and paying all of our own staff with these services. Would that be correct?
Yes, through the CAO to the chair and to the committee. Yes, by finding a municipality and contracting to the municipality, we're utilizing resources that are already there, that already exist. The other aspect of it too is in the case of Huban, I do not believe they have a medical first responder. They may, I don't know, but the service may be a little different than what is provided when we have our own fire hall.
Oh, thanks for that explanation. Do directors have any other questions on this item? Hearing and seeing none, then we have some recommendations. Recommendation 1 is for the financial plan to be approved for Denman Island Fire Protection Service number 215.
Did we vote on receipt?
Oh, no, we didn't. Thank you, Director Grieve. On receipt, is anyone opposed? And that is carried. And now we can move on to 215.
I'll move one.
Directors have moved and seconded. And any questions, comments? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Recommendation 2 is for function 220, the Hornby Island Fire Protection Service. I can move.
Second.
And seconded. Great, thank you. Any opposed? And that's carried. Item 3 is for function 225, the Fannie Bay Fire Protection Service.
Move 225.
Moved and seconded. Anyone comments, questions? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. And then we have function 226, the Union Bay Fire Protection Service. Moved Director Arbour. Second, Director Grieve. Comments, questions? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you. Do folks want to move on the next item, or do you want to take a break now? Okay, Director Arbour says yes to go for it. So we have the Greater Merville function number 237 and Mount Washington functions 240 for receipt.
Move report.
Moved and seconded and over to staff.
Yes, thank you. Through the CAO to the chair and to the committee members. First slide, please.
James, it's we're having a problem moving that up. So sorry, the presentation onto the screen. Would directors be okay if we did take that break right now? Okay, so I think lunch has arrived. I'm hearing so. So could we take, do you want to do 15 minutes? 10? Okay, so why don't we meet at 10 after 12 then, and we'll come back. All right, we'll see you then. Thanks, Director Grieve. We'll just take 15. Great. Thanks. I'll call the meeting back to order. We were just starting on item number 6, the financial plan for the Greater Merville and Mount Washington functions. And I believe we'd already moved and seconded. Do we have that? Yes, motions are there. And so I'm going to pass it over back to staff to go through the report.
James, it's all yours.
Perfect, thank you. So through the CAO to the chair and committee members, I'm now presenting for the proposed financial plan for the next grouping of fire services. These are the Oyster River Fire Protection, number 230, Greater Merville, number 237, and Mount Washington, 240. Each of these services are individual, and but we've grouped them together. Next slide, please, Lisa. Right on. We've grouped these together because they're inextricably connected through operations and so on. So what we've got here is essentially stable tax requisitions that are required to maintain the service levels for the residents. We have clear financial separation of the individual services where we're still sharing resources at an operational level for efficiencies and economy of scale. Contributions to reserves are still there and planned for planned capital purchases. But we have individual for each service planned capital expenditures. We also have the shared allocation of costs for the planned fire services review in 2022. Next slide, please. So Black Creek, although not part of the EASC, we've provided this for information. One of the key pieces to this is the recoveries from other functions, and you'll see that as being the 4th bullet down. And that's the contributions to the function of the Black Creek Oyster Bay from the other 2 functions. And you'll see as this unfolds. Next slide, please. So Greater Merville, the residential tax rate is estimated to be 41 cents per thousand of assessed value. That's actually a decrease from 2021. For that, $600,000 sample home, the annual tax is estimated at $243. Tax requisition of $535,000, which is a modest increase of about $550. Personnel costs of about $86,000. That's an increase of nearly $40,000, but that's a direct result of finding those efficiencies and utilizing management and staff at the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Service. We have operational expenses of $60,000. That's a decrease from last year, a decrease of about $270,000. Again, that's a function of as capital projects are completed, the building and shared resources. Here we have transfers to other functions, which is the Greater Merville's portion of the operational costs for the fire service of 158, almost 159,000. This service will have contributions to reserves of 90,000, which is a bit of a decrease from 93,000 from the previous year. Capital expenditures planned for 2022 of $64,000 in total. Next slide, please. Mount Washington. Now, Mount Washington, the residential tax rate is estimated to be about 89,000 or 89 cents per thousand of assessed value. That's a decrease from $1.01. For that $600,000 home, you're looking at $534. Tax requisition is $250,000, which is an increase of about $50,000 from the previous year. And that'll be if the fire hall building is successful in its AAP, then we'll be moving forward with that. And that will be reflected in the recommended budget if we're successful. Personnel costs of about $45,000. Operational expenses of $44,000. And again, the transfers to other functions of $32,000, almost $33,000. And that would be for, again, for the operations and management at an operational level by the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Service. Contributions to reserve of $62,000 and capital expenditures will all be updated with a successful AAP for the fire hall. Next slide, please. Ooh, and there we go. And there's the crew of the Oyster River Fire Rescue, and in that group of very dedicated volunteers is the crew from Mount Washington as well as Murrayville. And with that, we're open for any questions.
Thanks, James. Director Grieve.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I noticed that that our Fire Chief Green is still on the call. So I'm going to ask the same question we asked at the last meeting. And how many members do you have right now?
78 in total, 3 career chiefs and 75 paid on call volunteers.
There you go, huh? Thanks a lot.
Director Green or Chief Green, on that, I just noticed from the slide, we have, a fantastic group of volunteers. It's a large group, but I'm seeing a lot of women, which is really lovely to see. I don't know if you have any comments on your volunteers.
The group of volunteers we have are fantastic. They make my job redundant for me, which is nice. I could go away and they can run this hall without me, which is I'm very proud of. I believe women or females, we have approximately 18 on the force at this time, and we got some female representation at Mount Washington, female representation at Murrayville, as well as representation in Oyster River. And it is a very diverse group of people as well.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thanks to both of you. On receipt then? Oh, sorry, Director Arbor, did you have a question?
No, thanks. I can make my comment after, and I agree. It's so just generally speaking, since we're finishing fire services, just such great groups out there across the whole Comox Valley, and I think Black Creek Oyster River, I'm also hearing a lot of good stories about the work there. But more specifically, because we're on budget, maybe I have a suggestion for the future if we're going to keep it streamlined. I was thinking over lunch, maybe rather than just text like that, a chart, if we're going to look at trends. So something that looks back the last couple of years, outlines our 5-year financial plan, what's happening to reserves, surpluses, operations. A chart would be probably more helpful as a single slide than numbers that are not contextualized in relation to the past or the future. I would still prefer the full. We used to spend half an hour per each of those services or something like that. But if we're going to go streamline that suggested chart. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director. Director Green?
Sure, I would suggest going back to paper and putting the map with the sticky notes on it. Just kidding.
I'm assuming there's a good halfway in between, some kind of compromise there. I appreciate the amalgamation or clumping together some of these functions. That was nice to see. So thank you for our staff for presenting that. On receipt, is anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's approved. And we have recommendation 1 on function 237, the Greater Merville Fire Protection Service Financial Plan. Moved and seconded by Director Grieve. Any comments, questions? Hearing and seeing none, that is approved. And recommendation 2 is for the Mount Washington Fire Protection Service, function 240. Moved, and I can second. Comments, questions on receipt or on approval then? Is anyone opposed? And that is carried. Now we're moving out of fire protection into building inspection services, function 285. Moved. And I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Dennis Mirabelli is here, our Manager of Bylaw, Building Inspection, to outline the budget and provide you with background and answer any of your questions.
Over to you, Dennis. Thanks. Welcome.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair and the directors, as mentioned, I'm here to present the budget presentation for building services, function 285, and then answer any questions that you may have. I don't believe I have ability to change. Okay, thank you. Can you go to the next slide, please? I'll give you a quick overview of oh, there we go. Quick overview of our service. So building inspection regulation is provided for in the Local Government Act, and we do this in accordance with the Building Act. We provide this service in the 3 electoral areas, with the exception of Hornby and Denman Island. Staffing consists of property service representatives providing front-end customer service, as well as building inspectors that complete plan reviews and site inspections to monitor code compliance. In addition, we provide the service to the Village of Cumberland for their building inspection. And recently in May of 2021, we renewed that contract for an additional 3 years. Next slide, please. So 2021 proved to be quite a busy year. And in fact, it was our second highest number of permits issued in a single year since 2017. We issued 295 building permits, 187 plumbing permits. We did over 1,800 site inspections. In addition, and on the bottom of that chart, you'll see what the additional building permits we issued in the village for 80, doing another 534 site inspections there. So all in all, we did over 20, just around 2,400 site building inspections throughout the Comox Valley and Cumberland. Next slide, please. So this is a slide shows the permit share activity between the 3 electoral areas. So on the slide on the left side, out of the 295 building permits, 24% were issued in Area A, 37% Area B, and 39% in Area C. And on the other side is how many new dwellings were created out of those 295 building permits. So 146 new dwelling permits were created. And the majority of that share went to Area C with 51%. Now, there's one development in Area C that contributed to 30 of those dwellings. This, I believe it's called the Beach House at Saratoga, which was, it was 30 of the dwelling units were created in that one area alone. Next slide, please. So revenue for the service is derived from a combination of the tax requisition, service delivery functions, as well as surplus from previous years. So this chart shows the revenue that's generated from the service delivery. You'll see in 2021, which was our second busiest year, when we did 295 permits, the construction value for the year was just over 75 million. Whereas you look at the top of that chart with 2017, which was our busiest year, the value of construction at that time was only 49 million. So there's a 52% increase in construction value in 5 years, for which I found mind-blowing, actually. So the revenue that we generated last year was 500 and $87,766. So after doing research through the BC housing market predictions and what they predict for next year, they anticipate that 2022 is still going to be a strong year. It might not be as elevated as 2021. So in a conservative sort of way, we've projected $434,000 as kind of the revenue that we'll be generating next year with the service. Next slide, please. So this, so in summary for 2022, as mentioned, 434,000 is what we're projecting. We have no increase to the tax requisition. It'll stay flat at 299,000. There's a slight increase in personnel costs of 26,000, which reflects a 0.24 full-time employee position to assist in some digitizing of some files. And along with the 2% increase in the collective agreement to QP members. With the operating budget, we've increased it by 30,000. This increase is that we allocated additional funds for any legal costs, added more monies for training and development, as well biannually we put in monies for the GIS ortho photos, which will be coming in 2022. We do have a carryover of 35,000. So in 2021, we purchased 2 vehicles, but unfortunately, due to supply chain challenges, we only received one of those vehicles. So the 35,000 will be brought forward from 2021 into 22 in hopes that we can receive that vehicle. We're hoping in the first quarter of this year. In addition, we will be contributing 11,750 into our capital works reserve, which is for future buildup of when we do buy new vehicles, as well as we're estimating there's 162,714 in contributions to the future expenditures reserve, which is funded by prior year surplus. All in all, a home valued at $600,000 will have an estimated tax rate of about $18.60. And with that, next slide, please. I open it up to any questions that you may have.
Director Green?
Well, thank you, Dennis. That was fantastic, I guess, for Area C. It looks like we're growing leaps and bounds, even though, as you say, a lot of it is one particular project. My question was, what I see in addition to the multi-million-dollar 5,000 square foot houses on the middle of 20-acre properties going in out there is the other side of the coin. And that's basically requests for secondary dwellings on the property, mostly to accommodate family members moving back. And with the price of real estate, what it is now, it's doubtful that those family members will ever be able to afford their own places. So I'm just wondering if you got a breakdown in secondary suites, how it accounts compared to primaries.
The way we keep our, through the Madam Chair, through the Director, the way we keep our records, I mean, I can see if there's a way we can query that. We list them by dwelling unit. We don't specifically list them as if they're a secondary suite or a carriage house. It's just, so I'm not sure if I could actually get you that number. I do know that there were a number of carriage house plans. Like we see a lot of those. Last year we did see a lot of second dwelling permits come in. I just can't tell you the number. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
If I may, I think you could probably extrapolate it just by the by checking the properties that they go on to. But no, it's just a thought, because I think it bears to be noted that in today's market, as I say, it's very, very difficult for the younger generation to strike out on their own. So they're basically coming and putting either pre-manufactured homes or building their own homes or whatever with their parents. So I think that is a trend that we're going to see going forward. I know it's very difficult to subdivide outside the municipalities. So I think that might be something we might revisit if we ever get to a regional growth strategy, how to allow property separation for family members. Even though I do know that that avenue does exist, it's not an easy one. Thank you.
Before I move on to Director Arbor, I just want to concur that I think, you know, in the rural areas, carriage homes, secondary homes are really our only source of quote unquote affordable housing. And it's a big issue in the community. I think if in future staff have the ability to give us some of those stats, if you're able to tease that out, I think that would be really appreciated. Director Arbor.
That's great that my fellow directors have opened up the whole can around. We're moving from building permit budget to bigger kind of consideration. And as you were talking, I was smiling because last week I took a bit of time to read our rural OCP written in 2014. And I'll quote from it. Projected population growth in area A, B, and C is 0% to 2031. These projections suggest there is very limited need for increased housing in the rural areas. So in 2011, they projected, well, they had the data, we had 22,000 people, and by 2031, we would have 22,000 people. But I think that the dwelling units and the increased population is kind of known in the rural areas, and it's reflected, I think, in the building permits. I think your work is awesome. You have a pretty small department doing a lot, but my sense of it anyways. And in busy times, I know through COVID, it's been quite challenging. And I think last year you reported on bringing new, even like remote tours and things like that. So it seems like you're doing all this and the budget is not moving too much. So that's really good to see. I have also a kind of out of the box question. At the rest of our board, we're talking a lot about the carbon transition. And I'm wondering if you can comment on whether we're seeing any kind of step 3, step 4, step 5 houses or dwellings being built in the rural areas. And also if you have any general knowledge around the source of energies, like generally speaking, are people putting in heat pumps? Are they hooking up to gas, wood stoves? If you don't have the answers today, that's okay, but I think that's the kind of information that would be interesting in the future. But any commentary you can make on any of those two things would be great.
Sure. Through Madam Chair to the Director. Yes, for the step code, we are seeing, we do provide the incentives for if anyone constructs a building, step 3, 4, 5, that we would give them a rebate on their building permit. We've seen a number of people apply to put it in for that, and we just don't see them following through on a few of them to look for the rebate. So I know that they're being done, and I know there's a number of contractors in the valley that will only build your home when they at step 3 or higher. So they're doing it as we don't ask for it as a requirement here as of yet. The contractors are still doing that for their customers. So as much as we're not seeing the final paperwork, I could list 7 contractors right now off the top of my head that I know that's the only way they build. As far as the types of heating systems, I mean, in those types of homes, you'll see a lot of heat pumps. You'll see a lot of HRV units. I mean, gas is not readily available, and propane would not be probably financially, I don't think it would work. So yeah, I would anticipate most of those are like an electric heat pump that you're seeing for those homes. We are still seeing a number of wood stoves, obviously, in the rural areas especially. So I would say last year, if I'm not mistaken, out of the 146 dwellings that we created, I would say at least 40 of those people put in a wood stove. So, you know, as for a secondary heat source, whether that counts for the way the energy advisors count for when they do their calculations for their energy audit, whether they count all their different sources, how they get there, and I'm not sure how they how they rate that in their system or not. So.
Director Arbor, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. And one more, thank you. That's really useful insights. And there's a rumor that's going around, and I live on a small island, so rumors go quick and they're not always true. But I do know that Hornby and Denman are the last jurisdictions in the Gulf Island, in the Island Trust area, to not have building permits. And there's rumors that that's being looked at. Is the CVRD involved in any of those discussions, or has that arose?
No, that's not something that we would initiate, but certainly be open to the public bringing that forward if the public or the residents of the island want to explore that. It's something that we would help to facilitate at your direction if members of the public are seeking that. But again, it's not something that we as staff would promote or encourage. We recognize the independence of the islands and their desire to have what they have now.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions. So on receipt, is anyone opposed to receiving the staff report on the building services? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we have a recommendation to propose the building inspection service function 285 financial plan for approval.
Move recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, that's approved. Thank you. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
Next item up, we have the financial plan for part electoral area A, B, and C, bylaw enforcement function 291 for receipt. Moved
Second.
and seconded, and we'll just get a second for Amanda to.
Thank you. Yes, Amanda Yasinski, Manager of Bylaw Compliance, is here to present this financial plan budget and answer any of your questions with some very great illustrations.
Thanks. Over to you, Amanda.
Through the CAO to the chair. So this next report covers the 5-year plan for the newly formed bylaw enforcement service for Area A, Bain Sound portion only, Area B, and Area C. Next slide, please. The animal control service, which is the original 291 function, was included in the overall bylaw service restructure as part of the Rethink Comox Valley COVID-19 response. Specifically, that service 291 be expanded to include fireworks, noise, and unsightly premises. The restructuring was completed August 2021 and included the required service established by bylaws and inspector approval to have that completed. The new service was created with the amalgamation of animal control 291, noise, which is 295, unsightly premises 298, and fireworks, which was 299. So this means instead of a whole handful of smaller reports moving forward, it will be their services are rolled into one now. The restructure really allowed for more streamlined service delivery and administration of the services on all aspects. Next, thank you. So 2021 work plan accomplishments, finalized the COVID renewal services restructure, rollout of the CVRD's bylaw adjudication system. So we were successful in getting that completed by December 1st, 2021, and are still working on in-house staff training. Building inspectors have been completed. Bylaw staff was first. We're going to be reaching out to fire departments next for anyone who writes these tickets. So with the adjudication system, the ticketable offenses included review and inclusion of offenses for each of the services now forming the new 291. So animal control, noise, unsightly, fireworks. Also through 2021, water enforcement staff for the first time provided, bylaw enforcement staff provided water enforcement for the first time. Patrols enforcement, ultimately ticketing throughout the summer of 2021. As well as increased parks patrols, education, and enforcement in 2021. We had a strong presence in the parks. Animal control officers provided weekly patrols, information sessions, and as they do annually, they set up temporary license sales at each of our busier parks for the public to find them at. As well, in 2021, I wanted to add successful prosecution by bylaw staff of several disputed noise and unsightly premise tickets, a few land use ones as well. So our prosecution of tickets is now done exclusively in-house by staff. And we've had a great success rate on that. Next slide, please. 2022 work plan priorities, review and updating of the existing enforcement policy. It's a policy that we base how we handle files, respond to files, priority of files. So specifically with this review is the direct enforcement and remedial action capability on unsightly premise files, when we may undertake work on smaller cleanups and then charge that back on taxes, and wanting to update that in 2022. Review of existing animal control contracts, both the kenneling and animal control services that provide dog control essentially are due at the end. They expire December 31st, 2022. So we're looking at reviewing those and making sure anything we want to include in that RFP is done, specifically increase in parks patrols and enforcement, as well as finalize implementing the adjudication system. So the system's up and live. This would be more for training, as I stated earlier, for staff that are utilizing the system. Work with the planning department on development permit area enforceability. So this is something that's we've been working with planning closely on for some time. So 2022, we're hoping to bring that back before you, and continue to work closely with our CMP and other agencies in the community. Unfortunately, we do have several files on the go right now that do require our CMP attendance in order for staff to attend. That has increased from previous years. We have a very good working relationship with our CMP. Next slide, please. This is a comparison budget summary. I just want to just remind you, the increases over 2021 are based on last year's requisition rate when 291 was solely a service for animal control. It was not combined, so it does look like a very large increase, but this is now with all services rolled in to the Vancouver Island portion of what we provide. So there is an increase of 83,397 for requisition over 2021. Operating costs for this newly formed service are budgeted to increase by 33,526 over 2021. This reflects the combination of services now, as well as personnel costs, an increase 36,782 over 2021. Now this will be partially on the combination of the services down into one, and partially due to a new budgeted full-time position for Bylaw. It will be utilized across all of the Bylaw services. This translates to an overall increase of 1,438 to the service. The tax rate for the service is expected to be 0.0233, which translates to an estimated cost of $13.98 for residents assessed at $600,000. Next slide, please. So I still got the dog photo there from last year. So for 291, for our bylaw enforcement service, you can see there the requisition increase from last year's requisition when it was strictly animal control to this year's when it's all of the services inclusive. Just wanted to mention with the reserve contribution for this year, it's considerably less than last year. Last year we had taken on reserve funds from function 298 and 295 as part of that restructuring. They had to be depleted in their entirety for those services to then be restructured. So that was a one-time transfer over to 291, and that money is budgeted for 2022. It's a carryover from 2021 for the one-time purchase of a new bylaw vehicle. And I'm happy to say we have an electric truck on order. Our delivery is getting put back a little bit later and later as we go, but I'm still hopeful we'll have that by fall of 2022. We're excited for that. And I can answer any questions on this one. There may be.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Any questions from the directors? Oh, Director Grief.
Not much, except I think we're heading in the right direction by amalgamating these services. I think this is the way to go. Basically, they incorporate the same personnel, so it only makes sense. I'm just asking, basically, Amanda, on the park patrols, can you give us an idea of You say you've beefed up the controls on the parks. You know, we've had issues with dogs and horses and dogs chasing wildlife and whatever. So I think you said there's an increase of like half of a full-time position or something like that.
Yeah, through the chair, the last year, 2021, we had a pilot project with a part-time position shared through bylaw and parks and out in the parks. So this year, moving forward, we had to reassess, and our resource need is really more on the admin side to have our bylaw staff be able to be out more. We have a lot of really admin heavy legal action files, and that's been increasing year after year, the last 4 to 5 years. So we do not have that half-time position coming back for 2022. What we do have is a coordinator position proposed that's full-time. It is an in-office position, but that will then allow bylaw staff that are existing to be out when they're doing water and parks enforcement more than they have been, as well as the opportunity through our contract renewal for animal control services to include additional parks patrols. There's a set amount in our contract currently, so that will be part of that RFP review to make sure that the parks are getting those increased patrols and enforcement through a different means than they did last year.
Yeah, so the end result then will be that there will be more attention spent in the parks.
Yeah, there needs to be more attention, more visibility. It's not just for the people who need to be spoken with about dogs off leash. It's also to show the people who are following their rules and leashing their dogs and being on the appropriate trails that there is accountability and staff is out there. So we're hoping to increase our presence even more so.
I think that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. Amanda, I just had one question around your comment on increased RCMP files that require RCMP. Would you be able to elaborate on just the nature of those types of calls? Like, what are we seeing a trend there, or?
I don't know if I could say there's a trend. They're all quite unique. I think we've had a hard couple of years for the public, how we're able to engage with the public, and when people are having challenges on their own property in their lives, a visit from bylaw is compounding that, let's say. There may be other issues going on. So it's not one particular. We have some RCMP assistance on a variety of files from land use, noise, unsightly. Some of those are combined files. The increase for people to kind of, I think, dig in their heels, especially when bylaw is challenging maybe their lifestyle or how they're living. What means, whether that be in an RV or a suite that might not have a permit. So just a bit more pushback. The files are more complex, I can say, in general, and that tends to, people are just digging in a bit more. So we're going with RCMP only when it's really necessary. Once we engage RCMP, that ability to have a relationship with that property owner is forever changed. And that's not where we like to operate at. So we're only engaging we truly need to. And sometimes it's RCMP calling us saying, we highly recommend that you do not attend without having a member present. So that's also a change. That's new.
Well, I just want to note, I thank you for keeping those lines of communication open between you and RCMP, and the fact that you are really thoughtful about before you call RCMP and understanding the nature of relationships with homeowners and with the public. So thank you for that. I don't see any other questions. Oh, PO1, sorry, Director Over.
Thanks. I did, so great job on everything. And I did hear electric truck right at the end there. And just to know the economics, how that was looked at, both with finance and with the department. So over the course of the vehicle, was it looking comparable to buying a fossil fuel car? And of course, the question that everybody who's watching is going to ask is which brand it is.
My apologies to the chair. I should have come more prepared on that one. The truck was purchased. It's a Ford Lightning. so Ford product, in consultation with manager of fleet. So there were some options available. A lot of the electric that would have accommodated Bylaw were higher end SUVs, and that's not what we need. We need a utilitarian vehicle that's going to get us safely in and out of spots. So that's why we went with the truck. I was surprised. I don't recall the specifics. This year I budgeted as if we were still operating our gas Nissan Rogue, because there's uncertainty with the market and deliverability on that electric vehicle. So I didn't want to shortchange us on the budgets. The budget's still higher this year. Hopefully next year we can reduce that down, trucks in the lot, and we have a better idea. But it's about a third, from what I recall, to operate annually at the most. We were quite generous and if we were charging daily, which I don't believe we will be, but yeah. Excited to get it.
Thank you for that. I'll call the question on receipt. Is anyone opposed? And that's carried. And we have a recommendation to approve the financial plan for function 291 bylaw enforcement.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. And any comments? Hearing and seeing none. Is anyone opposed? That's carried. And moving on to financial plan for weed control service, Saratoga Beach Community Mosquito Management Service, and the Hornby Island Comfort Station Service functions 296, 623, and 688 for receipt. Moved by Director Arbor.
Second.
Seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And Mark Harrison is on the video link in order to present this budget and answer any of your questions.
Thanks. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Russell. Madam Chair, I'm here to present the 2022-2026 financial plan for Weed Control Service Function 296, the Saratoga Beach Community Mosquito Management Service, Function 623, and the Hornby Island Comfort Station Service 688. My plan was to just go over a service overview of each of these functions and look at the financial plans for each of those, and then have questions at the end if that's suitable.
Yep, go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. So the first one, Weed Control Function 296, just in terms of an overview, this is a regional service with operational contracts that include the COMP program, which is the Not on My Property program that targets giant hogweed and knotweed. That program actually in 2021, it managed 173 sites. So that was up from 145 sites in the previous year. And what was really good is that it actually eradicated 55 sites. So some strong work, I think, from that program last year. It also is operated through non-for-profits and community associations like DIRA and HIRA. And we also do kind of targeted control work like in Portuguese Creek. So that's kind of what we do kind of operationally. Now, traditionally, this pre-COVID, this service was funded partially through a provincial grant. It would provide $12,500 annually over a 3-year term. Now, with the onset of COVID-19, that grant funding became uncertain. So each year we just need to kind of apply for it, and but we don't know if we actually receive it or not. So, so because of that, we aren't going to be including it within this 2022-2026 financial plan because of the uncertainty. Now, kind of ducktailing on top of that uncertainty, we would like to see the creation of an FE reserve this year to help kind of mitigate some of that uncertainty. And we'd also like to propose gradual increases to the tax requisition to offset that grant. If I can move to the next slide, please. So in terms of budgets, we see that just like last year, we aren't budgeting for the senior grant. If we look down into the previous year's surplus, though, that we do see that within the 2022 proposed budget, there is quite a large surplus. And that was because we actually did receive the grant. And also because under our COMP program, it's run by Coastal ISC, they had staffing problems this year, and a bunch of that program couldn't get delivered. So that's why we've got a larger surplus going into this year's 2022 proposed budget. We are also proposing a increase to our requisition of $2,000 above last year's, and with incremental increases over the 5-year plan to get us into a position where we're not having to rely on that provincial grant. Operating budgets or operating expenditures, are up slightly next year as proposed. And that's because we're starting to kind of ramp up a little bit of our more of our treatment as opposed to where we were at last year. And then you can see about $5,000 or $9,000 we were proposing to put into reserves to create that FE reserve for this function. If I can go on to the next slide. So quickly on to Saratoga Beach Community Mosquito Management, function 623. So this is a new service. It was approved in 2021 through an alternative approval process and is established by bylaw. It's something that the residents within the Saratoga Beach community have been looking for since about 2015. So it's nice to see this, this service come into fruition. Last year and the year before, we did do some work was done through with an integrated pest management plan, and baseline data and monitoring was done for the area so that we can kind of start off on a really good foot in 2022. Last year in 2021, it was largely ran or administered by Sambra with financial support from the CVRD through a community rural grant. For this service, we are asking also for the creation of an FE reserve to manage unforeseen circumstances and ensure consistent service levels. Next slide, please. In terms of the budget, we're looking at a requisition of $29,000 in 2022. That amounts to a tax rate of 0.0522, and that would be a tax impact based on a $600,000 home of $31.32 for the residents that would be paying into this service. I just want to also note that within the expenditures, there is a transfer to other functions in there, and that is to pay back the feasibility service dollars. There's approximately $24,000 that need to be repaid into that service. So we're looking at repaying that over approximately a 7-year period. On to the next slide, please. And the last service in this bundle is Hornby Island Comfort Station Service, function 688. This is a service that is delivered through a subcommittee of HERA, and it looks after 4 year-round comfort stations and 2 seasonal porta potties on Hornby Island. There has been some recent community interest in replacing and adding some of those comfort stations, but unfortunately, the reserves are basically just shy of 12,000. So, and there's community interest to do work kind of more in the ballpark of $60,000. So staff are working with HERA on how to kind of address that. So we have asked them to produce us a business plan and to kind of demonstrate that need and provide some options on how we can kind of move forward with some of those comfort stations. The one that was kind of brought forward as kind of more in need of imminent replacement was the one at Little Tribune Bay. And the cost to replace that would be approximately $20,000. On to the next slide, please. So in terms of budget, we're looking at a modest increase from last year's budget, up $500. That will give us an estimated residential tax rate of 0.0212 with a tax impact on a $600,000 home of approximately $12.72. If you notice that operating costs have increased over last year, which is just increases to service for pumping and labor, et cetera. If you notice, we've got kind of lesser contributions in reserve than the previous year. And that was largely because we wanted to keep the tax requisition increase at a modest level. On to the next slide. I think that's it. So I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Director Grieve?
Thank you through the chair and CEO to Mark. I know that with the mosquito issue up at Saratoga Beach, some years I had to answer, I'm sure, 60 telephone calls and emails concerning the issue. I'm just wondering, has there been any communication with residents up there now that we've brought in the service? Has anybody actually phoned and said, you know, they have noticed an appreciable drop? Because I certainly have.
Madam Chair, in response to Edwin Greaves' question there, I personally haven't heard any, and maybe Doug DeMarzo has, because I've just taken on this service under the Parks umbrella. But I think I would have heard otherwise. So I think at this stage, I haven't really heard anything.
That's okay. No news is good news, as they say. Thank you.
You bet.
Doug has his hand up. So Doug, do you want to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. I have received a couple emails thanking the director and the CVRD for the service and noting the decrease in mosquitoes, but there's just been maybe a handful.
Thank you for that. Director Arter.
Yeah, thanks. That's good. That's good to hear, because it's the first time I see a budget that's up 1 trillion%. In fact, 1 bazillion%. It doesn't matter because you go from 0 to 29,000. But my question is about the comfort station budget on Hornby, and it's interesting that you brought up the little trib thing, which has come up a couple of years ago. I think at the time I was talking about, or we were talking about, how used that particular area of the island is. I think at the time I was advocating for looking if we could bring the right of way into our park service on Hornby. I'm still of the belief that long-term that makes sense, even though I think the comments back from staff is that it's very small. It's a very small area, but I was there yesterday, and it's now an area that's used year-round. I'm a little bit reluctant to say why, but I will. It's actually become quite a surfing destination. And yesterday there was probably 10, 12 surfers there and a bunch of people. And anyways, the park is really well used. The outhouse is old. And I think that the value for such small amount to keep some momentum going, the comfort stations that have been installed on the islands are very, that's been noted as a huge success story by both HERA and the regional district. And at the 20,000 level, my feedback was if there's a way to keep that momentum going, I think that would be really worthwhile. So yeah, just my thoughts. I'll let go of the taking over the right of way for now. I think we have enough on the books, but I'm not letting go of it forever.
Just a question to Mark on that. Can the funds that we have in reserve be used in conjunction with community works dollars or grant in aid to up the amount to cover a comfort station? Is that a possibility?
Madam Chair, yeah, we could couple reserves with community works funds if we were looking at wanting to replace that comfort station at Little Tribune Bay. As it stands now, we don't have enough money in our reserves to do that alone.
Okay, thanks. Kevin's also got his hand up, so I've triggered a financial thing.
Sure. Thank you very much through the chair to the directors. Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Mark has said. So yes, definitely there is the possibility of partnering kind of certainly what we have available, whether it was through, an increase in requisition or access to the minimal reserves we have with community works funds. Grant and aid, lesser so, because we don't encourage, if we already have an established service that supports a certain kind of activity, we do prefer that stay within that service rather than kind of dipping into, a multitude of different services. And as Mark suggested, we are continuing to dialogue with the higher out group to, look at, kind of a formal kind of business case to support this. If based on that subsequent information, staff, may, kind of bring this budget back and kind of recommend in that recommended iteration of the budget that we make some changes to potentially accommodate them.
Thank you. Director Arbor, I think that's his.
Well, thanks for prodding Chair Hamir and Kevin and Mark for your thoughts. Yeah, based on what I'm hearing, it looks like it's a possibility, right? I don't know the reserve situation close enough what's being planned for it, but if we have 12,000 and in the grand scheme of thing and 8,000, it's actually called Community Building Fund now. They've changed the name of the Community Works, and so if that can be looked at and brought back as an option, but again, we haven't seen the community building, or I guess legally it's still Community Works with our agreement 2024, but we haven't seen the report, so it's hard to make a decision on the spot, but I'm glad that Kevin mentioned maybe that's something that can be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. So Kevin, just a question. If we do approve the financial plan as presented, does that preclude us from amending it if we did want to increase the requisition? Like if we find that Community Works is tapped, or what would be the process? Is it better to potentially look at it now?
Through the chair to the directors, I mean, certainly, director's prerogative, based on information you received today, you could recommend, a number of different options. What we are suggesting, though, is, allow the conversations with HIRA to continue. We have asked, and I believe we just late last week received a bit of a business case supporting some of the comfort station replacements. So staff would certainly like the opportunity to kind of review that, reach out to HIRA again with any questions we may have. But we do have, 3 other opportunities where budgets will be coming back to this committee, and we can certainly bring back further information at that time and revisit.
Thank you. And a hand up from Doug.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to also note with the recent acquisition of Tribune Bay by BC Parks, we're also cognizant of these changes that might happen to Little Tribune Bay down the road as well. So there's a couple of conversations that'll need to happen on that island, and maybe the comfort station is the place for this, or maybe it's something else down the road. But staff would be happy to report back on that in the future and look forward to any direction you give us today.
Thank you for that. I don't see any other hands up. So on receipt, is anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. So we have the recommendation 1 for function 296, the weed control service function.
Move on.
Moved. And I can second. And is there anyone opposed? And that's carried. Recommendation 2 is for function 623, the Saratoga Beach Community Mosquito Management Service.
Move 623.
Moved. And I can second. And anyone opposed? And that's carried. And then finally, function number 688, the Hornby Island Comfort Station's financial plan for approval. Moved by Director Arbor.
Second.
Seconded. Any comments on that one? Hearing and seeing none. That is anyone opposed? And that's approved. Thank you. All right. We have the Denman Island Hornby bylaw enforcement function 299 for receipt.
Second.
And moved by Director Arbor. Over to staff.
Thank you. Through our CAO to the chair. So this is our second newly formed service, Denman Island and Hornby Island Bylaw Enforcement Service. So this service is function 299, which was the original standalone fireworks service. So now this is inclusive of fireworks, noise, and unsightly premise service combined for Denman Island and Hornby Island. So the function 299, excuse me, the fireworks service was included in the Rethink Comox Valley COVID response plan as previous with the animal control report. And the restructuring again was completed August 2021 with all the required accompanying bylaws and approvals. The new service was created with amalgamation of existing fireworks, noise, and unsightly. So fireworks being 299, noise control 295, and unsightly premise 298. So no longer a standalone set of budgets for those services as well. They'll all be inclusive of function 299 moving forward. So for this newly formed service, a future expenditure reserve will need to be established. The previous 299 for fireworks did not have a reserve fund. So we need to set that up moving forward for this service. So for 2022, a reserve contribution of $7,889 has been budgeted, with similar amounts budgeted annually across the 5-year plan to get that reserve built up. Next slide, please. The 2021 work plan accomplishments, and it's sorry, a little bit repetitive as this is a new service. I don't have anything directly specific to the 2 new form services. I've tried to tailor it here. So the adjudication system again was finalized and implemented. This included ticketable offenses for both Denman Island and Hornby Island fire departments, noise infractions on the islands, unsightly premise, as well as parks enforcement. So that was all included as part of that rollover into the adjudication system. Legal action concluded on several longstanding files. We had an unsightly and a noise file that went through provincial court prosecution by bylaw staff. They were both on Hornby in 2021, and those were concluded with success. As well as community meetings with RCMP and other stakeholders on increased roadside camping. Primarily on Hornby, but we did have some conversations and meeting with this occurring on Denman as well. So what that entailed was a meeting actually in this room with RCMP management from Modi, as well as a follow-up Zoom meeting with high-risk staff, and myself and RCMP. We were talking about some issues with camping at Little Trip in particular, the plan moving forward for 2022. As well as we've talked, the bylaw services restructuring. Next slide, please. So for 2022, for this service, continue to work closely with our CMP, and for the islands, it's very important also that open communication with both our fire departments and the fire chiefs and staff on mutual response efforts. And this might be where either a member or through the fire department, they want to bring something to our attention, or they may have even gone on our behalf on another call out and are able to provide staff some information. It's important being that bylaw staff, if we're not able to be on scene, that we have counterparts that are able to provide us that evidence. Further training for staff on the adjudication system. This will be specific to fire chiefs and duty officers for both Denman Island and Hornby Island fire departments. If they have need to use the adjudication tickets, they're trained up. And continued efforts on increased public education, the awareness of relevant bylaws, and the process for submitting complaints for the islands. This is something that's come up in some community meetings in the past. It's just that both Denman and Hornby Island residents are comfortable and know where to find us if they need us through phone or through electronic means. And then an increased presence on both islands for enforcement for 2022 in general. Next slide, please. So this is a comparative. Function 299, when it was fireworks, was a very small service. So the jump to include in now unsightly and noise is proposed to a $37,000 increase over 2021. Excuse me. The operating costs for the service are budgeted to increase by $10,301 over 2021. This was an increase when the tax requisition last year was just for that fireworks service. The operating, this translates to an overall increase of $29,305 for the service. And the tax rate is expected to be 0.0266, which translates to $15.96 for residents assessed at $600,000. Next slide, please. So here you can see with the operating costs previously, in particular, were quite low when it was just fireworks. I think the budget for legal and for fireworks originally was $1,500. So the increase this year, the 10,301, is primarily for increased advertising efforts, as well as to have a legal budget that could accommodate those services as a standalone legal budget for the newly formed service. As well as the contributions to reserve. There was no reserve fund for fireworks previously. As the service is now inclusive of the 3 independent rolled into one, there'll be reserve funds budgeted annually moving forward throughout the plans. And I can answer any questions on this one. There may be as well.
Great, thanks. I don't see any questions here in the room, and I'm just going to check. Director Grieve, do you have any questions? I don't think so. So on receipt then, is anyone opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. And we have the recommendation to approve the financial plan for function 299.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And is anyone, I should also say that the recommendation is also to include that CVRD board's direct staff to put forward a bylaw to establish a future expenditure reserve. So that's included in the recommendation. I hope both directors are okay with that. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, is anyone opposed? And that's carried.
Madam Chair, the directors are continuing their discussions and considerations of budget matters next Monday. We will hold a special meeting for that. And I would like to ask if the board would just refer the planning services budget to that time. You were in camera considering some matters, and we still need to go back and finish those off in the essence of time and resources. I think it would be best to do that and refer this to next Monday if you agree.
Okay, thanks for that recommendation. Do we have a motion to that effect? We have a motion to refer 11 to next week from Director Arbor.
Seconded.
Second. Anyone opposed? And that's carried. And I'll just need a motion to move in camera. Or we've got a motion, right? Yeah, we can just. We'll